We're going to talk about Elastic Disaster Recovery. This is a service that is offered by AWS. If you've been using AWS for quite some time, it was previously called Cloud Endure. It has since been integrated inside the AWS console, so it's not a separate product. And there's a lot of really cool features inside of it. I've been building disaster recovery with this for about 5 years with various customers, and I'll talk about some of those examples as I go through the presentation today. Lauren, are you able to hear me okay? Is everything coming across?
Yep, everything sounds great.
Perfect. Okay. So this is me. I lead up solutions architecture for Align Technology Group. I've been doing this for 29 years. I'm a former Amazonian. I started AWS nonprofit solution architecture and for healthcare. And I've worked at Cisco, Arista, VMware. I've been a developer in many different roles. So here's a quick agenda of what we're going to talk about today. Some of the people joining today may not know about ATG, so I'm going to give you a quick overview of ATG and what we do, what our areas of excellence are. And even if you know who ATG is and you've been working with us, you may not know of all the different things that we do for customers. Then I'll get into EDR, how it works, functionality, and examples of pricing, and I hope it'll be very informative for everybody on the call today. So first and foremost, who is Align Technology Group? Well, we've been around for almost 6 years. We focus only on AWS. We don't do cabling and networking and data center and things like that. If it's inside of AWS, we work on it. We do a lot of migrations. We do a lot of data projects. But we work with customers across many different verticals. So manufacturing, gaming, finance, healthcare, software development, state and local government. So we have a broad experience and a lot of excellent people on our team to actually architect and deliver from an engineering perspective. So I'll show you some of the areas of excellence here. So I go through, and if you have a need here, just let us know. You can put it in the chat or reach out to us afterwards. So what we focus on here at ATG, we have several different pillars with our skills. First off is cloud advisory. A lot of our customers, if they haven't moved to cloud, sometimes they need assistance. What should they move to cloud? What should not move to cloud? What should move to SaaS? And how do you properly do that? How do you architect to take advantage and actually save money instead of spending more money? So it's very important that you do that planning and assessment in the beginning if you haven't already moved something to cloud, and whether that's your entire colo, a single application, or you're just consuming data and moving that over. Definitely work with us if you're unsure how to do that in public cloud. We're very, very experienced at that. Once you're in the cloud, a lot of customers are concerned about cloud finance, and you want to have some alerts, or maybe you want to have some guardrails to keep people from turning up different services and things like that that would cost you money or are not relevant to your business. So we have different tools and methods and automation to help you control the finances and keep your operational expenses within budget. I would say the most powerful pillar here with us is the cloud engineering. This is where pre-sale solution architecture and delivery function. So this is actually building your infrastructure, your applications, your services, building the automation, everything that you need in the software-defined world of public cloud, whether that's code pipelines, infrastructure as code, or developing that application that runs your business like we're doing for different customers right now. Cloud security is important. I'd say security in general should be important to any business, especially in this day and age. And I suspect some of you on this webinar today are interested in DRS because security, right? Well, security is how ATG really started this practice. It was focused on security compliance, whether it be HIPAA, whether it be PCI or GDPR if you're operating overseas. We have excellent experience here with security automation and building those proper guardrails so people can't accidentally step outside of the security guidelines and put you in a risky situation. And last but not least is artificial intelligence, and data and analytics. Now, we have several projects going on right now, but we have experience with Bedrock and working with different large language models with SageMaker, building data warehouses with Redshift for customers, and even in Snowflake. We have some experience there as well. But as a company, we usually like to approach these projects with our customers in a consultative way where we want to know what your problem is that you're trying to solve so that we can architect it properly and help you get to that point and make sure that it's fully scalable. So whether that's advising you or building it or building the end visualizations with the BI tools, we can help you all along that journey at every different stage when it comes to analytics. And Lauren, I can't see the chat window, so if anybody's asking questions, just let me know, please.
You got it.
All right. All right, so a lot of people mistake disaster recovery with backup. So I want to double click on that for a moment and talk about the difference between disaster recovery and backup. We've had backup for 20, 30 years. We've been backing up databases. We've been backing up files. We've been backing up operating systems, right? But there's a difference in how they function and how you restore them and whatnot. And one of the key items that you really need to focus on for your business is your recovery objectives. So what is your RPO and your RTO? And as a business, if you don't know what that is for your applications, we can help you figure out what that is and prioritize properly. If you're not familiar with an RPO, is how much data you can afford to recreate or lose. Again, that depends upon your business. Can you lose hours worth? Can you lose days worth? Or is it only minutes for your business? RTO is how much downtime you can afford to have before you need to be up. Now, I know from being on the customer side and being on the vendor side that a lot of customers today have cybersecurity insurance. And in some of the cybersecurity insurance policies, you'll see that it requires a disaster recovery service that is actionable and has a specific RPO and RTO that is in that contract that you must be able to demonstrate. So what I'm going to show you today will meet those guidelines for that. What I'm not going to show you is AWS backup and just backing up files and things like that. If you want to see that, I'm happy to have another meeting with you and show you a demonstration on how we do that with automations and tools and resiliency. But the whole idea is having a full disaster recovery and being able to turn that up in minutes or hours, depending upon how many applications and what your RPO and RTO requirements are. Now, many of the customers that consume AWS EDR are traditionally inside a colo or data center. They haven't moved to public cloud. We do have some that are inside of AWS and are replicating to another environment. But when you think about traditional disaster recovery, I go back to my days of working in the data center before I moved to working on public cloud. And I've had customers in my past where they have to build this entirely separate colo or data center and replicate the hardware. I had a healthcare system that I worked with when I was at VMware, and they literally identified all the critical applications they need to have the business running. We identified all the scope of everything, and then they bought the same storage that they needed, the same compute, the same networking, everything, and it sat there and it collected dust. It waited for that disaster. Now, you could argue maybe they could have done active and things like that, but then what happens in the disaster? The capacity is not there. So it gets really expensive because you're buying double of what you have for your production environment in order to prepare for that disaster. And that hardware's got to be far away. You've got to take care of that hardware. You've got to patch it. You've got to do all those different things, right? All the stuff that happens at a data center will happen there as well. Whereas cloud disaster recovery allows you to copy the data, but not have to buy all the networking and all of the servers and all those things. You just consume them and turn them up as you need. So when you have a disaster, you start consuming those resources that are required for that. And that's what we're going to talk about here with EDR. I'm going to focus a little more in on that. Now, with AWS EDR, it supports many different replication endpoints. So it's Hyper-V, Windows, Linux, VMware, of course, from ESXi 5.5 on. Hopefully everybody's at 7 or later, so they have proper support. Where you can't replicate is with mainframes and firewalls and load balancers in tools like that. You can write backups and things like that and put them in storage if you want, but typically you're not going to replicate that into an AWS environment. Maybe you'll have a software-based Palo Alto or Cisco or something like that. But a mainframe, if you are looking to move that to cloud, we need to talk because you would need to modernize those applications. Running simulators and things like that don't run really well in a cloud-based environment for mainframes. But anything else, you can do real-time replication using this tool, and it's block level replication. Lauren, do we have any questions or should I keep going?
No. They're having trouble with the chat. I have people asking in the Q&A. So if you can put your questions in Q&A instead of the chat, that would be helpful.
Okay. I'll keep going, and if you get some questions, just interrupt me. All right, so this is a great diagram that explains how disaster recovery works, how EDR works. In this example, I'm doing a data center, or it could be in AWS cloud as well, or it could be in Azure or GCP if you like. But you install these replication agents. I lost my mouse. Install these replication agents, and they're going to do continuous block level replication that's compressed and encrypted. And that's going to go over to what's called a staging area in a user VPC or virtual private cloud. So that is going to be going to EBS volumes, which is bootable storage. So this is what you would boot an EC2 instance, or in the VMware world, you would call this a virtual machine. Now, you're not running the virtual machines, you're not paying for the virtual machines and taking on that expense. You're paying for the service that's replicating and the storage that you're consuming over here. So what's going on is after your initial backup, every time there's a block change on the disk, it's replicating that over here. So that as changes go, depending upon the speed of your link, you're going to have the most up-to-date data over here. And then if you have a disaster recovery event and you need to enact this plan, you've got a very low RPO and RTO. You can have a near zero RPO and RTO. I've seen people turn these up in minutes, sometimes in seconds, where they've lost little or no data in their environment, which is pretty darn impressive, especially with today's attacks and things you see going on. When you recover this, there's a recovery subnet. So there's automated blueprints that you create in advance, and you define what the recovery instance is. So the recovery instance is the EC2 size, and this will be how much virtual CPU, how much memory, and whatnot that you have, how many network interfaces you've got on this, et cetera. And it's going to mount these bootable drives that you've been backing up over here. And this will be your production environment where you'll point your DNS to, where your users will connect to and start consuming and utilizing these services for DR event. This can happen very quickly depending upon the size of the CPU and memory that you have on these and how many you're turning up. The longest I've ever seen one come up was less than 30 minutes. So it's rather quick, but the key is you have the data. As long as your RPO and RTO are low, you are at a good point and your business is up and running very rapidly in this environment. Are there any questions, Lauren, or should I keep on going?
Keep on going.
Okay. All right, so usually when we do a replication or a move, there's a lot of data that you need to copy over depending upon those key services that you want to back up. you can, previously, before they turned on these features inside of AWS, you could consume all the bandwidth on, your VPN, your internet connection, or on your AWS Direct Connect if you want. So what they did is they put features in to have replication throttling. Think of this as kind of like quality of service, bandwidth throttling, if you will, so that you're not consuming all the data with your backups pushing over to AWS. Once that initial backup is completed, then it's block level and it's usually very small files. But that initial setup period when you're copying everything over, it can be a lot of data going. So you don't want to have a lot of lag, but you can actually control these numbers inside of the CLI, or if you want to do it via API, so that you have acceptable performance for all your other workloads going to AWS while you're still backing up the data. And you don't have to have separate internet links or dedicated links if you don't want to. So it's a great feature that they put into EDR. So I talked about how we back up. There's different ways to replicate the data inside of AWS. The first most common one is public transport. So you notice we encrypt the data over port 443 using certificates over your public internet connection. So if you've got a very large internet pipe and you want to send all the data over that, go for it. You can also throttle that back if you like, but you don't have to do a LAN to LAN. You don't have to do direct connect if you don't like, if you don't want to do that. More commonly, I'll see customers say, hey, I'm going to use 443, but I either want to use my SD-WAN and I'm going to have endpoints inside of AWS for that, or a LAN-to-LAN IPsec tunnel to AWS, and I'm going to replicate over that. So then you've got 443 inside an IPsec tunnel. And then if you want a more reliable connection, that's a direct connect. So direct connect is an Ethernet over MPLS circuit. It can be cross-connected inside of a colo, or you could have a circuit running back to your business if you've got an on-prem data center. And that's just dedicated bandwidth depending upon what type of bandwidth you want to have there. Customers that are hybrid cloud, where they've got some workloads in AWS or they're all in on cloud, usually have a couple of direct connects for their production because that's their link to where all their workloads are. And so from that aspect, we just changed the way that this routes so that it uses a direct connect. But it's very easy for us to change. Is it taking a direct connect? Is it taking your IPsec tunnel? Are we pointing it to your SD-WAN for replication? Or do you default as to go over internet? So a lot of options here to work, but every single one is secure. And when we build it out, we show you how this works and set it up appropriately for your business. I'm not sure how well you can actually see this, but I'll step through it. This is a screenshot of the console. So the first step here in the process is we initiate recovery via the AWS console. You can select an individual machine, or you can select a whole group of them or all of them if you like. The next thing you do is you select a point in time recovery. So say you lost some files and you just want to recover those, you could recover that machine and grab those files. I've seen people do that. Or if you are hard down and you need to recover everything, you pick all your critical workloads, you could have grouped together and say, restore them all. And they're going to bring them up in your environment. And then once you've done that, you're going to commit to cloud failover. And I'm going to go back to the diagram here. So what we're doing is everything's in staging and you're telling it now commit over here to the recovery subnet. And what EDR is going to do, it's going to stand up the recovery instances that you selected, boot up on the machines, and they're going to start their networking. Now, there are some things you're going to have to do, like clear your ARP cache. If you're coming from an existing environment, you're going to have to make some DNS updates to point to the new devices that you have over here instead of pointing at the old ones that may be down, things like that. And those can be easily automated. We can help you do that as well or do it for you. But this is probably the quickest way I've ever seen a business get up and running with a DR type solution. And I've been doing this 29 years. So, all right. Once we committed, All right, here's the EC2 launch template. So when we create these launch templates, you've got test and production environments and things like that. And there's all different types of integrations that you've got in here. If you're familiar with AWS, you can use CloudFormation, you can use Terraform, CDK, or you can just go on the CLI. This is a picture of the CLI and how to launch them and whatnot, but very easy to do, very easy to integrate with. If you're not familiar with AWS, we usually start with the CLI and we train you. And then if you've got some automation folks, we'll help you with that and automating this environment. I'll say we like to automate these environments so that we can turn up all the other critical services, like I talked about a moment ago with DNS and things like that, and clearing cache. And if there's anything else critical for your business, maybe you need to do some database verifications. Maybe you want to check and make sure your websites are acting appropriately and things like that, and you want to automate that. You can do all those things in this environment and have it part as your standard procedure. But that's just additional automation on top of EDR that we would have to help you build as well, which we're happy to do. Lauren, any questions or keep on going here?
We have one question of how do companies generate revenue on the cloud?
How do companies generate revenue on the cloud? All right, so it depends upon the company. We're working with a startup right now where their whole product is on public cloud. So their software, the databases and everything that their customers are going to consume are on public cloud. There are a lot of different companies that generate revenue on the cloud. I mean, you're probably using some of them. You may not know about it. If you use GoDaddy, that's on AWS. That's using majority of AWS services on the back end. There's some pretty big customers. A couple of mine that I've worked with, Atrium Healthcare, if you're in the Carolinas, they run on AWS. So all the critical infrastructure that they utilize in the healthcare system that runs there. We've worked with manufacturing companies that do a lot of analytics on AWS. So looking for efficiencies and ways to decrease cost in their environment and look for errors in products. I worked with a company that was manufacturing, and they wanted to find if there was a problem in their product before it left the production line. And you can use visual tools in AWS and analytics to do that and practically let you know, instead of letting it continue to go down the line and somebody to catch it, 3 or 4 stations later, you can catch it right away and fix it right away. So you're not creating a disruption and you keep product moving. So there's a lot of different things you can do with AWS to help your business and create revenue. Was that a good example, or would they like to hear a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that's great.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Nope, that's it. Keep going.
Okay. I've got one more slide here. So I'm going to talk about EDR pricing. And you can see this on the AWS page if you look at Elastic Disaster Recovery. So the hourly rate per source server is 0.028 cents per hour. That comes out to be about $21 per month per server protected. So very inexpensive. It all depends upon how much data you're pushing over there and what grade of disk you're using. This is GP3. This is SSD. There is less expensive, but typically this is what we go with because it's the most quickly bootable and it's not expensive at all. But it's 0.05 gig per month. So you're looking at about $8 a month per instance protected when you've got 100 gig, just as an example. Snapshots, if you've got different snapshots, you can do that as well. Here's an example of what that is. And then the replication servers, it really depends upon how much CPU, virtual CPU and memory you need. But a small one like a T3 small is 0.0208 cents per hour. This changes regularly. AWS typically drops their prices as they come out with new types of compute that cost them less. They send the savings on to you. So I encourage you, if you want to look at these, I can show you how all the pricing in that works and what the actual costs are. But at the time that I made these slides here, it was about $15 per month per replication instance if you were to run this for the whole month. So if you have a DR situation, you're now booting these up and now you're paying for them. But it's a very, very cost-effective solution. As an AWS partner, we're very experienced with building this and automating it. And we also have access to funding from AWS for programs like these. So depending upon the size of your environment, what you're building out, and even if you're not an AWS customer now, or if you are an AWS customer now, feel free to work with us. And in some cases, a large portion of this can be paid by AWS funding. And
Eric,
if
we have
you're
a
not,
question.
yes,
Um,
ma'am.
you mentioned Hyper-V and VMware are supported. If the data center workload is on VMware, is there a requirement to have a minimum VMware cluster up and available in AWS?
Great question. No, you do not need to have anything VMware in the environment. And I'll go back to the diagram. So if this is your VMware environment over here, you would run the replication agents, and that would come from your existing environment. And what it's doing is it's replicating over the operating system and all the data. If it's a SQL Server, Windows, etc. And it's putting that over here in an Amazon machine image format that we can boot up. So the replication is taking care of that in the block level. You do not need to pay for VMware licensing. You do not need to run a VMware cluster. It would all be native AWS once you got over here, so no additional costs. Does that answer your question, or do we have another one?
That's all I have for now.
So yeah, okay. That is actually the end of the webinar.